I never imagined that one day I would walk into my own living room and find out that my son, the boy I raised with these very hands, the boy I carried on my shoulders when he was small, had already prepared the documents to sell the only house I had left in this world. My house. My last memory of my late wife. My only fortress. And he was doing it while I was still alive. Can you imagine the feeling, standing there hearing him say, "Dad, don't worry, it's just business," while another man in a suit spread my personal papers across my table, as if I were already dead? Tell me, would you call that love, or would you call that betrayal? I am 70 years old, and I know what people think when they see me. Old man, tired, maybe a little weak. They think I no longer see, no longer hear, no longer understand. They think I should be grateful for whatever crumbs of attention are thrown my way. But let me tell you something. Right now, age does not make you blind, and silence does not mean weakness. When my son thought he could strip me of my home, when he thought he could erase my life with one signature, he forgot one very important thing. He forgot who raised him. He forgot whose blood runs through his veins. At that moment, I held my breath and stared at the contract laid out on the table. I recognized the street address, my street, my home, the place where I buried my wife's ashes in the garden under the oak tree, the house where every picture frame on the wall held decades of sacrifice. And in black ink, bold and final, it said, "Property Transfer Agreement." My son's name was already scribbled there, like a thief signing his confession. The buyer, a stranger in a dark gray suit, was leaning back with that arrogant smile that businessmen wear when they think the deal is already done. Do you understand what that does to a man, to see his own flesh and blood, treating him like an obstacle to be removed? For 70 years, I have fought battles life. Threw at me poverty, loneliness, the death of my wife, and I thought the cruelest blows were behind me. But in that moment, I realized the sharpest knife was not held by an enemy outside, but by the son I once carried in my arms. The irony cut deeper than any blade. 3 months ago, he had looked me in the eye and said, "Dad, don't worry, I'll always take care of you." And now, here he was, not only failing to care for me, but plotting to leave me homeless while I was still breathing. Maybe you're wondering how I reacted. Did I shout? Did I collapse? Did I beg him to stop? No. I stood there as still as a stone, letting them believe that I was powerless. That was my advantage. They thought they were playing me, but what they didn't know was that I had already seen the cracks in the wall long before this day. I had already begun preparing my own move, quietly, patiently, like a chess player waiting for the right moment to trap the king. As my son leaned over the table, pushing the pen closer to me, saying, "Dad, all you need to do is sign here." I felt a coldness in my chest that wasn't fear. It was clarity. He thought I was an old fool, but the truth was every word, every look, every false smile over the last year had already told me something was wrong. And instead of confronting him too early, I watched. I listened. I prepared. I looked into his eyes, those same eyes that once sparkled when he was a boy building toy houses in the backyard. But now, they were the eyes of a man who had turned his back on everything I gave him. Greed had replaced innocence. Betrayal had replaced love. And still he had the nerve to call me Dad, as if the word itself could erase the knife he had planted in my back. I'll ask you a question, and I want you to really think about it. If your own child tried to sell the roof over your head while you were still alive, while you were standing right there in front of them, what would you do? Would you forgive them? Would you sign away your dignity just to keep the peace? Or would you like me find a way to show them that the old man they underestimated still had fire left in his soul? Because I can promise you, this what happened next was not weakness, it was war. A war not fought with fists or guns, but with something sharper, truth, patience, and preparation. They thought they could rob me quietly, sign a piece of paper and erase me from my own home. But I had been watching, I had been recording, I had been planning. And when the moment came when they thought I was cornered, I turned the table in a way they never saw coming. So sit with me now. Listen carefully. Because this is not just a story about an old man and his ungrateful son. This is a story about betrayal, about fire buried deep inside a man's chest, about dignity stripped and dignity reclaimed. And before we are done, you will see how even a father betrayed by his own blood can rise from the ashes and make the betrayers wish they had never underestimated him. And tell me, right now, if you were in my place watching your own son trying to sell the house you built with your bare hands, would you let it happen? Or would you fight back? Comment 1 if you would fight back like I did. Before all of this, before lawyers and contracts and betrayals, there was just me and my boy. His name is Daniel, though to me, he will always be Danny. The boy who once ran barefoot through this very yard, with his knees scraped and his laughter echoing against the walls. I was 33 when his mother died, and from that moment on, every breath I took, every hour I worked, every sacrifice I made was for him. I had no one else, and he had no one else but me. That bond I thought was unbreakable. I worked double shifts at the factory for years, coming home with my hands cracked from steel and grease. At night, when he was asleep, I would sit at the kitchen table and calculate how much money we could save for his education. I skipped meals. I wore the same coat for 15 winters, but I made sure Danny never went hungry and never went to school in torn shoes. When he asked me once why I never bought anything for myself, I told him, "Because my treasure is watching you grow." That was the truth. He was my whole world. I remember the nights when the power would go out, and we couldn't afford to pay the bill until my next paycheck. Danny would look at me with fear in his eyes, and I would strike a match and tell him, "Look, Danny, tonight we camp under the stars." We would sit by candlelight, eating beans from a can, and he would laugh as if it were an adventure. I thought those nights bonded us for life. I thought he understood that even in darkness, I tried to make him feel safe. When he was a teenager, he wanted a car like all his friends. I couldn't afford one, but I saved every dollar I could until I bought him a used pickup. I still remember his face that day, his smile so wide, his arms wrapping around me, telling me I was the best father in the world. I held on to that moment like a photograph in my heart, believing it was proof that all the sacrifices meant something. And when he went to college, oh, how proud I was. The first in our family to go. I sold my late wife's jewelry, the only inheritance she had left me, just to cover his tuition. I told myself she would have wanted it this way, for her son to rise higher than we ever could. At the graduation ceremony, I sat in the back row, tears in my eyes, whispering to her spirit. We did it, love. He made it. When Danny married, I thought my circle was complete. I handed him the keys to the house for his honeymoon night. I wanted him to feel that this roof was not just mine, but ours. I told him, "This home will always be your safe place." And he hugged me, promised he would always be by my side. For years, every holiday was spent here. Christmas dinners where I roasted the turkey, birthdays where I bought the cake, anniversaries where I gave them money tucked in envelopes because I wanted them to feel secure. I lived for those moments. When my son's wife once called me dad, I felt my heart expand. I thought perhaps I had gained another child. You see, I am telling you all of this because betrayal never comes from a stranger. It comes from the one you would have bled, for the one you thought would carry your name with pride. If you had seen us back then, you would never imagine where we would end up. We were inseparable. He would call me every morning. "Dad, how are you? Did you sleep well?" I kept every voicemail he ever left me. I listened to them on lonely nights, convincing myself that no matter what, my boy loved me. This house, was always the anchor. Built with my sweat, repaired with my own hands, painted and repainted with every storm. Each brick held a memory, Danny's first steps in the hallway, his drawings still hidden on the back wall of his old bedroom, his mother's laughter still echoing in the kitchen. That is why I never remarried, why I never left this place. It was sacred ground, the last living thread, connecting me to the woman I loved and the child we raised. I remember one Sunday morning, maybe 20 years ago, when Danny was still in his 20s. We were sitting on the porch drinking coffee. He looked at me and said, "Dad, I don't know how you did it. You gave me everything even when you had nothing." I told him it was simple. That's what fathers do. We give so our sons can stand taller. He promised me then, with tears in his eyes, "When you're old, Dad, I'll make sure you're never alone. I'll protect you the way you protected me." Those words burned into me. I believed them as gospel truth. And that is why, years later, when I discovered his plans, the knife cut so deep. Because this was not just a son turning greedy. This was a son breaking his own vow. This was a son who forgot every sacrifice, every night I worked, until my bones ached, every dream I buried, just so he could fly. Tell me, have you ever trusted someone so completely that you would hand them the keys to your life without question? That was me with Danny. He was not only my son, he was my pride, my companion, my reason for waking up every morning. I never thought he would be the one to look at my house, this sacred place, and see not memories, not family, but money. When I think back to those days, the tenderness, the laughter, the promises made under this roof, I ask myself, was it all a lie, or did something change along the way? Was there a moment where love turned into greed and I was too blind to see it? Maybe I didn't want to see it. Maybe I clung so hard to the image of the boy he once was that I ignored the man he had become. That's the cruel thing about memory. It tricks you into believing the past guarantees the future. I thought the years of loyalty of sacrifice would shield me from betrayal, but I was wrong. The past is a fragile glass, and when it shatters, the shards cut deeper than anything you ever imagined. And so, as I sat in my living room watching him push those papers toward me, I didn't just see a contract. I saw the grave of every promise he had ever made. I saw the death of the boy I once knew. Now tell me if you were me, remembering every sleepless night, every penny sacrificed, every vow whispered by your child, and then seeing it all collapse in one act of greed. What would you feel? Rage, grief? Or would you feel what I felt, that cold clarity that this was the moment everything would change? Comment 8 if you think betrayal from family is the deepest cut of all. The thing about betrayal is that it never arrives all at once. It comes in whispers and shadows in the little moments you brush aside, because your heart refuses to believe what your eyes are already telling you. Looking back now, I realize the signs were there clear as day, but I was too blinded by love to admit them. It started with the phone calls. For years, Danny used to call me every morning just to check in. Good morning, Dad. Did you eat breakfast? Don't forget your pills. That kind of love is what kept me alive after his mother passed. But then slowly the calls stopped coming. At first I excused it. He was busy with work, with his marriage, with life. I told myself, he'll call tomorrow. Tomorrow turned into weeks. And when he did call, the tone was different. Rushed, distracted, his voice, clipped. He would end conversations with, I gotta go. Dad talk later, and later never came. Then there were the visits. He used to come by every Sunday, sit on the porch, share a beer talk about the week, but suddenly, Sundays became excuses. First it was overtime at work, then family obligations, then nothing at all. I found myself sitting on the porch alone, 2 beers in hand, waiting for a car that never pulled into the driveway. I remember staring at the road, telling myself he'll be here any minute long after the sun had gone down. Money started disappearing too. Not mine but his. I could tell. He would come over and complain about bills piling up, about debts, about unexpected expenses. Once I caught a glimpse of his phone screen flashing with messages from numbers, he quickly hid. His hands trembled when he put it away. I asked him if everything was all right, and he smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. It's fine, Dad. Don't worry. I wanted to believe him. There was a day when his wife Anna visited me alone. She sat at the kitchen table, her eyes darting, her fingers tracing circles on the wood. She said, he's been different lately, secretive, talking about investments, about needing quick money. He won't tell me everything. I told her it was probably stress that Danny had always carried too much weight on his shoulders. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. And then came the small requests. Dad, can I borrow a little cash until payday? At first it was small amounts, 50 here, 100 there. I gave it gladly. A father never wants to see his son struggle. But then the amounts grew larger. Dad, can you help me with 2,000? I'll pay you back, I promise. The promises never materialized. When I asked, he laughed it off. Don't worry, Dad, you'll get it back. But the laughter felt forced, nervous, like someone whistling in the dark to hide their fear. One evening I noticed my documents had been moved. I keep everything in a drawer in the study, the deed to the house, my will, my financial papers. I'm meticulous about where I place them. That night when I opened the drawer, I saw the edges not align the way I always leave them. My heart skipped. I asked Danny the next day if he had been in my study. He said no, but his eyes flickered away too quickly and his hands dug into his pockets. I told myself it was nothing. But was it? Another time I overheard him on the phone in the backyard. He thought I was asleep. His voice was sharp, urgent. I'll have the papers soon. Just be patient. I froze behind the window, my stomach tightening. Papers. What papers? When he came back inside, I asked who he had been talking to. He shrugged. Just a friend. He avoided my eyes. The final straw, though, came on a quiet Saturday. I had misplaced my reading glasses and went into his car to see if I had left them there the last time he drove me to the doctor. What I found was not my glasses, but a folder tucked under the seat. Inside were photocopies of my house deed and some blank legal forms. My name was written on sticky notes attached to them. My chest tightened so hard I thought I was having a heart attack. But when he came out of the store and saw me holding the folder, I shoved it back under the seat and forced a smile, pretending I hadn't seen anything. My heart screamed the truth, but my mouth stayed shut. Why? Because I was still his father. Because I still wanted to believe that the boy who once promised to protect me would never turn into a man plotting to take everything from me. I clung to the past, blind to the present. Looking back now, I see how foolish I was. The late-night phone calls, the sudden disappearances, the missing documents, the folder in the car, they were all warnings, red flags waving in my face. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? We excuse the ones we love even when the evidence is screaming. We tell ourselves, it can't be true, not my son. But it was true, and by ignoring those signs, I gave him the space he needed to move forward with his plan. The cracks had begun to spread, and soon the wall that held us together would collapse entirely. Now, let me ask you if you had seen those red flags. If your own child was acting secretive, moving papers, hiding debts, would you confront them immediately? Or would you like me look away, hoping love would somehow fix it? Comment 9. If you believe that ignoring the signs only makes the betrayal worse. The night it all came crashing down wasn't loud. It wasn't a storm or a fire. It was silence. A silence so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat echoing against the walls of the house I had built. I had gone to bed early that evening, or at least that's what my son believed. But when you are 70 years old, you don't sleep the way you once did. You wake easily. You listen to the smallest sounds. That night, I heard the creak of the study door. My study. The room where I kept every important paper of my life. I lay still, breathing slow, pretending to sleep. Minutes later, I rose quietly and padded down the hall. The light from the study spilled across the floor in a thin line. Through the crack in the door, I saw him. My son, Danny, my own blood. He was rifling through the drawer, pulling out documents, placing them in his briefcase. His face wasn't the face of a son caring for his father. It was the face of a thief, focused, determined, cold. I stood there frozen, my hand gripping the wall to steady myself. I wanted to rush in to shout, to demand an explanation. But something inside me told me to wait, to watch, to let him show me who he truly was. He pulled out the house deed, unfolded it, and took a photo with his phone. Then he slid it into his briefcase. I felt my chest tighten, my breath growing shallow. There it was, the truth laid bare. He wasn't borrowing. He wasn't confused. He was planning. Just then, his phone rang. He stepped back, glancing at the screen, and answered in a hushed voice. "Yeah, I've got it. Don't worry, the old man doesn't suspect a thing. Next week we'll have everything signed." The old man, that's what he called me. Not dad, not my father, just the old man. My knees almost gave out. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood to keep from making a sound. My son was no longer speaking. As a child of mine, he was speaking as a conspirator, and I, the man who raised him, was nothing more than an obstacle. He ended the call, closed the briefcase, and quietly left the room. I slipped back into bed, pretending to sleep, my mind racing like a storm. I stared at the ceiling, the shadows twisting above me. The truth was no longer a suspicion, it was undeniable. My son was planning to sell my house behind my back. But here is the twist he didn't see coming. That night, as he slept soundly in his own home, thinking I was weak and blind, I was wide awake, recording every detail in my mind. The following morning, when he left for work, I went into the study and checked the drawer. Sure enough, papers were missing. The copies of the deed were gone. The will was disturbed. I called a friend of mine, an old neighbor named Michael, a retired police officer. He came over and I told him everything. He listened quietly, then said words that pierced me deeper than any knife. "He's setting you up, John. If you don't act fast, you'll wake up one day and your name will already be erased." Michael helped me install cameras in the study hidden in the bookshelf. We placed another near the hallway, one by the front door. From that day forward, every time Danny came to visit the house, was watching him. He thought he was sneaky, but the walls had eyes. And it didn't take long. Just 3 days later, I caught him on video bringing a man into my home while I was at the doctor's office. The man wore a suit, carried a leather folder, and they both sat at my table, going through my documents. My documents. My son pointed to the deed to my signature, laughing, saying, "Don't worry, we'll get him to sign. He's old, he won't understand." I watched the footage that night with my hands trembling, rage burning in my chest. This was no misunderstanding. This was betrayal carved in stone. My son wasn't just thinking about it. He was doing it, actively, willingly. And here's the part that made my blood run cold. At the end of the video, the man in the suit asked him, "What if your father refuses?" And my son leaned back, smirked, and said, "Then we'll find a way to prove he's not in his right mind. It won't matter what he wants." Do you understand what that means? My own child was prepared to declare me incompetent, insane, unfit to make decisions just to take my house. The son I raised was ready to bury me alive in paperwork, to strip me of dignity while I still had breath in my lungs. That was the night I stopped being a father and became a soldier again. Not the kind with weapons, but the kind with patience and evidence. If my son wanted war, I would give it to him. But I would fight with truth, with strategy, with time. I began collecting everything. Every video, every suspicious call, every bank statement. I built a file so thick it could crush any lie he tried to spin. I didn't tell him, I didn't confront him. I smiled when he visited, I nodded when he asked questions. I even made him dinner, and all the while I was building the case that would one day destroy his plan. The early twist was this: I wasn't the fool he thought I was. He believed he was 2 steps ahead, but I was already watching from a higher ground. He thought he was setting a trap for me, but in truth, he had already walked into mine. And let me ask you this: if you discovered your own child plotting against you, stealing papers from your home, calling you the old man, to strangers, would you confront them immediately, or would you wait, gather proof, and strike when they least expected it? Comment, yes, if you believe patience can be the sharpest weapon. And B, when betrayal first knocks at your door, it whispers, a missing paper, a hushed phone call. But once you catch its scent, betrayal grows bold. It no longer hides in shadows. It parades in daylight, daring you to stop it. That's what happened in the weeks after I discovered my son's plan. Danny grew reckless. He came to my house more often, sometimes with flimsy excuses about checking in on me, sometimes with no excuse at all. He walked through the rooms as if they already belonged to him, touching the furniture, opening cabinets, testing the locks. He would make comments casual on the surface, but laced with poison. "Dad, this old place must be hard for you to maintain. Maybe it's time to think about moving into something smaller, something more manageable." Manageable. That was his polite word for dispossession. One evening he showed up with Lena, his wife, carrying grocery bags. They hadn't brought me groceries in years, but suddenly they were placing items in my fridge, smiling too wide. "We thought we'd cook you dinner," Lena said. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes were sharp, scanning my kitchen like an appraiser. During dinner, they asked questions no loving child would ask. "Do you keep all your bank documents here?" "Dad, maybe it's safer if I help you organize them. You know, in case you forget something." Forget. That was their weapon, painting me as forgetful, confused, fading. I played along. I let them think I was tired, distracted. I nodded, gave vague answers, even fumbled my fork once on purpose. Let them believe their performance was working. Every smile I gave them was a mask. Behind it, I was storing every word, every gesture like bullets in a loaded chamber. But escalation doesn't just come from words. It comes from actions. And soon, their actions grew bolder. One afternoon, I came home from a walk to find my front door unlocked. Inside, papers were scattered across the table. My will, my insurance policies, even my late wife's letters, all laid out as if on display. I froze in the doorway. Then I saw it, a note scribbled in Danny's handwriting. "We'll help you sort this out, Dad. Don't worry." Don't worry. The arrogance of that note burned in my chest. I didn't call him. I didn't shout. Instead, I walked straight to the bookshelf where the hidden camera's red light blinked faintly. Later that night, I reviewed the footage. There they were, Danny and Lena, moving through my study like predators. Lena, holding my will in her hands, whispering, "If we can just get him to sign this amendment, everything will be easier." Danny nodding, replying, "He won't even understand. We'll tell him it's for taxes." Taxes! They planned to disguise their theft as protection. The very next day, the escalation sharpened into confrontation. Danny called me, his tone falsely cheerful. "Dad, I've scheduled an appointment with a lawyer for you. Just some simple estate planning, you don't have to worry. I'll pick you up on Thursday." I let him think I agreed. I said, "Thank you, son. I trust you." But when Thursday came, I didn't get into his car. I called my own lawyer, Mr. Howard, instead. Together we went to the courthouse and filed protective documents. My accounts were locked. My deed was placed under special notice. Any changes would now require my direct in-person verification. My assets were shielded. That afternoon, Danny showed up at my door, furious. "Why weren't you ready?" "We had an appointment," he barked. His mask was slipping. He wasn't the loving son anymore. He was the impatient thief. I forgot I said softly, feigning confusion. Old age, you know, slips the mind. He clenched his fist, his jaw tight. He wanted to shout, but he swallowed it down. Instead, he left without another word. But I knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. The next week, small acts of intimidation began. I noticed a car parked across the street late at night, engine idling. When I stepped outside, it sped away. Anonymous calls came to my landline, heavy breathing, followed by a click. My mailbox was open, letters missing. Each act was designed to rattle me, to make me doubt myself, to weaken my resolve. But they didn't understand. I had lived through worse storms. I had buried a wife. I had fought through sickness and war. I had raised a child with nothing but my hands and my will. They thought they could break me with shadows and whispers. No, they only strengthened the fire inside me. Still, escalation is not without cost. There were nights I sat alone in the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where my wife used to sit, wondering if she would forgive me for raising a son like this. I drank coffee gone cold, listening to the echo of my own breath, asking myself how love could rot into greed so completely. Then came the most audacious act yet. I returned home one afternoon to find strangers in my yard, two men with clipboards measuring the property line, taking photos of the roof. "Can I help you?" I demanded, stepping out with a steadiness I didn't feel. One of them looked up casually. "We're here on behalf of a prospective buyer. Your son arranged it." Prospective buyer. My blood turned to ice. My son hadn't just dreamed of selling my house. He had already set the gears in motion. I forced a smile, thanked them, and let them leave. Then I went inside, locked the door, and sat in the living room, shaking. The escalation had reached a peak. This wasn't just whispers, notes, or manipulation. This was real. Papers could be signed, deals could be closed, and I could lose everything if I made one mistake. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the desk, reviewing my growing file of evidence, videos, recordings, notes. Each piece was a stone in the wall I was building against them. But even a wall can be stormed if the enemy is desperate enough. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Danny. His voice was sharp, stripped of pretense. "Dad, things will go smoother if you stop resisting. This house is too much for you. Let us handle it. You'll thank me one day." "Will I?" I asked quietly. "Yes," he snapped. "Unless you'd rather we prove you're not fit anymore. Do you really want it to come to that?" And there it was, the naked threat. My son telling me that if I didn't comply, he would strip me of my very sanity in the eyes of the law. The escalation was complete. No more masks, no more sweet smiles. The battlefield was drawn. On one side, a son and his greed. On the other, an old man who refused to be erased. But here's the truth they didn't know. Every escalation of theirs was an escalation of mine. With every threat, I grew sharper. With every betrayal, I grew stronger. They thought they were tightening a noose around my neck. In reality, they were walking straight into the snare I had prepared. And I ask you now, if you were in my place with your own child threatening to strip you of your dignity, would you bow your head and give in, or would you dig in, fight back, and make them regret underestimating you? Comment 9. If you'd fight until your last breath. The storm finally broke on a Thursday afternoon, not with thunder or lightning, but with a knock on my door. 3 sharp raps, confident, insistent. I knew before I even opened it that the moment had come. I had been waiting, preparing, tightening the net, and now the trap was ready to snap shut. When I opened the door, my son was standing there in a pressed suit, Lena by his side. Behind them, a man I didn't recognize, carrying a leather briefcase, eyes cold as glass. "Dad," Danny said, his voice already defensive, as if expecting resistance. "We need to talk." I stepped aside, let them in. My living room, the heart of my home, suddenly felt like a battlefield. Lena took her usual spot on the sofa, crossing her legs like she owned the place. Danny paced restless, while the stranger set his briefcase on my table and began pulling out documents. "This is Dr. Myers," Danny said, gesturing. "He's here to help us with your affairs." Dr. Myers adjusted his glasses, gave me a tight smile. "Mr. Carter, I've been asked to evaluate your capacity to manage your estate. It's just a routine process. Nothing to be concerned about. A routine process." Those words dripped with menace. They weren't here to evaluate me. They were here to strip me legally of everything I was. I sat in my chair, steady as stone. "And who asked you to come?" I said softly. Danny stepped forward, his voice rising. "We did. Your family. Because you're not acting rationally anymore. Canceling transfers, locking us out of accounts, installing cameras like a paranoid old man. This isn't you, Dad. We're trying to protect you. Protect me, the knife hidden in a velvet sheath. I let the silence stretch, then leaned forward. Protect me from what Danny from, living in my own house, from controlling the money I worked for, from trusting the son I raised. Lena cut in, her voice sharp. From making mistakes you'll regret, from being manipulated by people who don't have your best interests at heart. I almost laughed. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. They accused me of being manipulated while they were the ones pulling every string, staging every scene. Dr. Myers cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, I'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind. Simple things, your date of birth, today's date, your financial situation. I looked him dead in the eye. Doctor, I don't answer questions in my own home without legal counsel present. If you think I'm incompetent, you'll have to prove it in court. And trust me, I'll be ready. Danny slammed his fist against the table. Why are you doing this, Dad? We're your family. Everything you have will be ours one day anyway. Why drag this out? There it was, the naked truth spilling out like poison. Everything I have will be theirs one day. To them, I was already gone. My body not even cold, my house already sold. I stood, my voice louder now, echoing against the walls. You speak as if I'm dead, but I am very much alive. And as long as I breathe, this house, this money, this dignity belongs to me, not to you. The room erupted. Danny shouting, Lena crying crocodile tears. Dr. Myers trying to play the calm professional, but I had prepared for this moment. While they stormed and raged, I walked to the cabinet and pulled out a folder. My folder, thick with evidence. Do you see this? I said, slamming it down on the table. Videos, recordings, notes. Every time you entered this house without permission, every time you touched my papers, every call you made planning to sell what isn't yours, every word captured. Danny froze. Lena's tears stopped midstream. Dr. Myers blinked uncertain. I've lived 70 years. I continued, my voice cutting through the silence. Do you think I don't know how to spot a liar? Do you think I can't recognize a con when it's under my own roof? You've underestimated me, both of you, and that was your greatest mistake. Danny's face twisted with rage. You can't win this, Dad. We'll take it to court. We'll prove you're unstable. We'll get the house one way or another. I stepped closer, my eyes never leaving his. Then we'll see each other in court. But understand this, you won't just be fighting an old man. You'll be fighting every document, every recording, every witness I've gathered. You'll be fighting the truth, and the truth always wins. Lena's voice cracked shrill. You're cruel, Renata. After everything we've done for you. I cut her off with a raised hand. Done for me? You've done nothing but take. You left me out of your wedding, called me irrelevant, used me like an ATM. And now you stand here in the house I built, daring to tell me I owe you more. No. This ends here. Dr. Myers shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should reschedule this conversation. It seems emotions are high. Emotions, I barked. No, doctor. This is clarity. This is truth. Danny tried one last tactic, lowering his voice, almost pleading. Dad, please! Don't do this. You'll end up alone. You'll regret pushing us away. I looked at him, and for a brief second, I saw the boy he used to be. The boy who ran into my arms after nightmares. The boy who said, I love you, Dad. And then that vision faded, replaced by the man standing before me, a man who would rather declare his father insane than work an honest job. I've been alone for a long time, I said quietly. The difference is now, it's by choice, not by your neglect. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved, no one spoke. Then slowly I pointed to the door. Get out. Danny's face hardened. Lena's lips tightened. Dr. Myers gathered his papers. They left their footsteps heavy, their dignity in tatters. At the threshold, Danny turned one last time. This isn't over. No, I replied, my voice steady, unshaken. It's just beginning. When the door closed, the house was silent again. But it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a battlefield. Cleared the silence before rebuilding the silence of freedom reclaimed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the table, my evidence spread before me, my lawyer on speed dial. The war had broken into the open, and I was ready to fight it to the very end. And now I ask you, if your own child came into your home with strangers, papers, and lies, would you surrender everything you built? Or would you rise even at 70 to defend what's yours? Comment. Okay, if you'd fight no matter the cost. The days after the confrontation were heavy, but they were also clear. I no longer lived in the fog of suspicion. The masks had been torn away, the truth laid bare. My son had declared war on me, but he had also underestimated the strength of a father who had already survived every storm life could throw. Mr. Howard, my lawyer moved quickly. Within a week, we had filed restraining notices on the property. No sale, no transfer, no adjustment could be made without my direct signature in person, witnessed and certified. The bank accounts were secured, the cameras upgraded, the evidence filed neatly in case the courtroom became our battlefield. Danny tried to push back. He called, he shouted, he begged. Sometimes he pretended to cry, sometimes he threatened. Sometimes he sent Lena to soften me. Dad, let's just forget all this. We were only trying to help. Let's be a family again. But you cannot build family on lies. Their words were sand slipping through my fingers, and I refused to catch them anymore. Then came the letter, a thick envelope stamped with the seal of the court. Inside was a petition. Danny and Lena had filed a motion to declare me legally incompetent. They were trying to strip me of my decision-making power to place my estate under their control. In black ink, my son had written that I was confused, forgetful, paranoid. He painted me as a senile old man lost in his own house. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. My hands shook not from fear but from anger, so deep it burned cold. To be erased by your own blood, there are few cruelties sharper than that. But I was not alone. My lawyer prepared me, my neighbors rallied behind me, and even Anna, my daughter-in-law, cracked under the weight of her conscience. Quietly, secretly, she came to me one evening and said, "I can't keep lying. Danny is out of control. I'll testify if you need me." Her eyes were red, her hands trembling, but her words were clear. That was the first time I saw that not everyone around him had surrendered their soul. The day of the hearing came. I wore my best suit, the same one I wore at Danny's graduation years ago. Back then I wore it to celebrate his future. Now I wore it to defend my own dignity. In the courtroom, Danny sat across from me, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He looked sharp, confident, certain that the law would bend to his will. But confidence is nothing against truth. The judge asked questions. Simple ones. At first my name, my date of birth, the year, the president. I answered clearly, steadily, with no hesitation. Then came the deeper questions. Could I explain my finances? Did I understand the value of my property? Did I know why I was in court? I spoke with clarity, with conviction. I explained the mortgage I paid off 30 years ago, the accounts I managed, the medical appointments I kept. I even quoted the petition Danny had filed against me word for word, because I had memorized every line. The courtroom was silent except for my voice, and I could feel the tide turning. Then it was Danny's turn. His lawyer pressed him, trying to paint a picture of a concerned son, but cracks showed. When asked why he had copies of my deed, why he had arranged property inspections without my knowledge, why he had spoken about proving my incompetence, his answers faltered. His face flushed, his words tangled. And when Anna took the stand and admitted he had pressured her into helping him, the truth was undeniable. The judge's ruling was swift. Mr. Carter is competent, capable, and clear-minded. The petition is denied. Furthermore, this court warns against any further attempts to exploit or manipulate his estate. I didn't cheer, I didn't gloat. I simply nodded, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. Justice doesn't need noise, it speaks loudest in silence. After the hearing, Danny didn't look at me. He stormed out, his pride shattered, his plan in ruins. Lena followed, her eyes cold, her mouth a thin line. And just like that, they were gone. I walked out of that courthouse, not as a victim, but as a man reborn. The house was mine, the dignity restored, the storm survived. But more than that, I carried with me a lesson carved deep into my soul. Love is a gift, not a guarantee. Even blood can betray you. And when it does, you must choose bow your head and surrender, or stand tall and fight for the dignity that no one has the right to take. I chose to fight. Now, my days are quieter. I still live in this house, the walls lined with memories. I sit on the porch in the evenings, the oak tree swaying gently, and I think of my wife. I tell her I kept it safe, love. I didn't let them take what we built, and sometimes I almost hear her laughter in the breeze, proud and warm. Danny doesn't call anymore. Maybe one day he will, maybe he won't. But I no longer wait by the phone. I no longer keep 2 beers on the porch. I have learned that some doors once closed must stay closed. But I am not alone. My neighbors check in, my sister visits often, and I have built a new circle of friends, men and women, who have also faced betrayal, who understand the sharp sting of family turned foe. Together we share stories, we laugh, we cry, and we remind each other that even in old age we are not weak. We are survivors. So, let me ask you, listening to my story, now if you had been in my place, would you have surrendered your house, your dignity, your very identity, just to keep peace with a greedy child? Or would you like me stand and fight, even if it meant standing alone? Comment yes if you believe dignity is worth fighting for, no matter the cost. Because in the end, that is the lesson. Money can be lost, houses can be rebuilt, relationships can fracture, but dignity is the one treasure that once surrendered can never be regained. Hold on to it, defend it, even if you must stand alone on the battlefield of your own living room. And I promise you this, when you walk out victorious, when you reclaim your dignity, you will never feel more alive.